The best thing to play on your solo is the melody. Nobody will ever complain if you play the melody. You're not going to learn by watching a guy show off all the time. You have to learn by, watching something that you can understand. Hey folks, Tony Winston here, Jazz Piano College. We're going to work a little bit on the song Take the A Train. I'm going to start off really, really basic, but I will give you some advanced things towards the end of the video, so stay tuned for that or just skip ahead. And I'm going to go over really some basic stuff at the beginning here. You're going to go over the chords and how to find jazz chords and all the chords on a lead sheet. And I'm going to go into some of the scales that are appropriate for those chords and show you how to use them. I'm going to assume you know a little bit, but I'm going to explain every chord and how I came up with it. And I'm going to cover a few little bit of advanced topics so you kind of know where this whole thing is going. But I understand that beginners get overwhelmed, when you start getting too complicated. So I'm going to keep it simple. All right. The song starts with a little introduction. We have a C chord here, and then it's going to change. It's just this lower note's going to go down to F sharp like that. So just from there down to there. And the right hand is going to come down these three notes and two black keys like this. And you'll notice that every note is exactly a whole step apart. That's like two half steps, right? So it's like every other note. You skip this one and go to that one. Skip that one and go to this one. And do it like this. Just kind of going like this with your hand. There's a little bit of finger motion in there. That's our intro. You do that a couple of times and then you start the song. And sometimes you'll just see a C major chord, but in jazz, especially older jazz, you can add a sixth to it or a major seventh. Either one's going to sound good. And you want to give your chords a little bit of a rhythm, like a 1, 2, 3, 4, And that's an and of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, like that. It's right before the downbeat. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Then put some right on the beat like that. 1, 2, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. All right, now that was a D dominant seventh, and what I mean by dominant is it's a major chord and the seventh, dominant seventh is the chord. Say a dominant seventh chord means a major chord, the root, if you move it down, you can find the correct seventh, because it could be this or this, but a dominant seventh, it's this one. A major seventh, it's that one. Dominant seventh, it's this one. And the melody hits this note, which is like right next to that note. So we're going to leave the 5 out, the root, the third, the fifth. We're going to leave that out because our right hand is going to play the 5th, and it's going to flat the 5. And this is how the older jazz musicians would think of this chord. And this is the jazz chord, a dominant 7th with a flat 5, like that, all right? And you'll hear this over and over again in jazz, and I'll show you even other places in this song where you're going to use it. Now we're going to go to D minor 7th, and once again we have to decide whether it's this 7th or that 7th. And this is just stuff you have to know. You can't look at the chord symbol and say, well, I think it means this. You have to know this. If it's D minor 7th, it's that one, D minor 7th. There's our melody. And then we're going to go to G 7th. And I'm playing all these chords right now in what you say is root position, because if I call it a G 7th, I will have a G on the bottom, like the roots of a tree, down on the bottom. All right, and there's a G dominant 7th. Now remember, we already had D dominant 7th in this song, so we're going to use the same idea here. We're going to go a G major chord. I'm assuming you know the difference between major and minor, right? Major, minor, okay? And then down 2 half steps or 1 whole step from another root G gives us the dominant 7th chord. Let's start at the beginning. Three, four, and do, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you know, if you're playing a chord and the melody gets down to where the chord is, just get out of your way. You just take that finger away. And some people play D flat there, and D flat makes a lot of sense because look at the G chord. That's the 5. What did I say was the jazz chord of all time? The dominant 7th chord with a flat 5. So if you played like this, you get that chord. And then it's back to C. Now, any chord like this can be inverted. That means, invert means to turn upside down. You can do it several ways. I mean, you can go up, you can go down, take the bottom note, move it to the top. All right, that's an inversion. Then take the bottom note, move to the top again. All these can be considered a C6 chord. All right, and if you inverted one more time, you'd be back to what you call root position. All right, do the same thing with D dominant 7th. That's the same chord. That's the same chord. Again. And the reason you want to use some of these inversions is you don't want to be jumping around all over the place. It sounds smoother. You've heard of smooth jazz, I'm sure, but it sounds smoother to, like if you're changing from a D chord, rather than jump all the way here to a G 7th chord, D minor to G 7th, if you inverted this chord, you could take these 2 notes and move them down here, you see, and you've got that. So that's G7. And remember, this was D minor 7, so if you just go like that, it sounds so much smoother. They call this voice leading, you know, so those voices move. All right, and that's how we're going to do it too, all right? So here we go, the verse again. Let's call it the A section. Now see, watch, I'll move these 2 down. And see, and from this one back to C, it was what you call smooth voice leading. Some of the notes changed, some of them stayed the same, and they all moved a very short distance. We like smooth voice leading. Okay, so there's another section to this song, and you know, you play the first section twice. So we'll say A for the first, you know, the A section twice, and then we're going to go to the B section. And in the B section of the song, we're going to move to a key that's very related to C. We're just going to go up a 4th to F, okay? And you can hear if I play a C chord and then an F chord. You know, C chord, F chord. They sound, you know, good together. If I went, let's say, C to F sharp, that kind of sounds like, well, doesn't sound smooth, let's put it that way. But this does. And so that's where we're going. And a good way to get to this F chord, we're going to use something called the cycle of fifths now. You know, you can go down to F as well, and that's a fifth. So when you hear about the cycle of fifths, this is what we're talking about. And sometimes people call it the cycle of fourths because you go up and get to the same note. It is exactly the same thing. And some people call it the cycle of fourths and fifths. And other people will just call it the circle. Okay, so we want to get to F. How do we do it? With a dominant chord, dominant 7th chord. And the theory is here that because when we voice lead to F, this only moves a half a step, and this one moves a half a step to F. That is not just smooth voice leading, that's very strong voice leading. This C7th chord wants to go to F more than to any other chord. Now it can go to other chords, definitely it can, but this is cycle of fifths. And when you talk about a 2-5-1, this is the 5-1 part of that. This is called the 5 chord and the 1 chord if you're thinking about the key of F. All right? Now in the key of C, which is the key the song is in, at the very end of the A section, when we go, we're playing G7th. Notice it goes down a fifth to C, and it's a dominant chord moving to the 1 chord. Okay? I'm explaining the cycle of fifths, what you sometimes can call dominant motion. 2-5-1 is how jazz musicians refer to it, because they typically play not just the 5 going to the 1, but the 2 chord first. The 2 chord, the 5 chord, which I'm going to invert, right, because make it smoother, and the 1 chord. And you can see what a smooth progression this is, and that's why it's so popular. And you can use it any place in the song where it says to use it, and lots of places where it doesn't even say you can use it. You can figure out a way to use it. All right, now we're going to the bridge. We've got a dominant 7th chord. Here's the bridge. And we're playing F major 7th. It could maybe be a 6th chord, but I think the chart says a major 7th. And it's a major chord. And instead of going down like to a dominant chord, we just go down this 1 step here. So, and look, the melody is the same notes. All right, and then we're going to go to D dominant 7th. We know about that one. And the melody does almost the same thing. But look, see, it's playing the same notes. All right, but what's this note up here? It's not the root, the 3rd, the 5th, or the 7th. It's what they call the 9th. And now we're really getting into advanced jazz, people. Yes, we are. But that's what the melody does. So even without playing a fancy jazz chord like D9, if you play D7 and just play the melody, you're getting that sound. And by the way, if the chord symbol says D9, you don't have to go like that, which I could barely do, because the melody is the 9. So just play this and play the melody, and that is a D9 chord. And D9 means a D7 with a 9. And a D7 means it's a dominant 7th chord. If it's a major 7th chord or a minor 7th chord, which are 2 very common chords, it'll say little m for a minor, and M, big M, or MAJ, or there's lots of ways to write these chord symbols, and it's a real pain learning them all, but you need to. All the different ways, that is. Okay, so did we get through the bridge? All right, now D. And then D minor. That's the 2 chord, you see in the key of C. That's 1, that's 2. And then we're going to go to G7. I'm going to put this one in root position. Okay, I don't care about voice leading all the time. So I went from D minor to G7 because this chord is what you call a G7 with, and this can be called a tension or a color tone, but it is a 9, and it is not the regular, what you call the regular 9, which kind of comes from the scale. Like that. It is the flat 9. You see, it's a half step up from the root. There's where you're going to find it every time. Flat 9 will always be right there. And you can play it down here too and still call it a flat 9. But it belongs up here because it's the melody note of our song. So that's where it's going to be. All right. And once again, this is dominant motion. This is cycle of fifths. We're going from G7 back to the 1 chord in the A section. All right. If you didn't know about the cycle of fifths or about, what you call dominant motion before, I hope this unlocks the door for you so that you can understand really, the harmony of most any song. Now, almost every song, especially jazz standards and anything in the classical era, uses this theoretical fact that a dominant seventh chord leads to a major one chord, the 5 chord to the 1 chord, they call this. This should unlock the mystery of harmony for you. If it doesn't, study it until it does, because everything else is kind of built on this until you get into kind of real modern concepts and things. So it's important. I hope I explained it well. Now, right here, I went to G7, but I put in the flat 9. And I didn't have a finger real handy to play both of those notes, so I left out the root. Can you leave out the root of a chord? Yes, you can. Especially if it's a strong melody, it's something that people recognize, or at least they can relate to it. Your ears will fill in that note. I mean, not fill it in, you won't actually hear it, but you'll understand the harmony. This makes as much sense as this, where I do have the root, G, back to C again, see? And I mean, there are college professors that will tell you every piece of classical music basically is built upon this fact. The root, the dominant, and the root. You get it now? Yes. Have I mentioned Dave Frank's channel? I don't think I ever have, and it's a good channel. Look up Dave Frank. He's a New York guy, lives in Manhattan, good jazz piano player. If you're into doing walking bass, you could do this song like this. Check this out. This is what Dave Frank does really well. He can play unbelievable stuff with his right hand and keep a good bass line going. And how do you make a bass line? You kind of do it with the chords. That's the starting point anyway. See, I'm playing C6 chord like this. And here, I'm just going right up a D dominant 7th chord like that. And then, I'm going to D, so I could go D minor, I should have said. And now I'm going to go to G next, so I can need 4 notes to get there. 1, 2, 3. Oh, if I get there, I'm too early, so I'll put this one in. 2, 3, 4. And now I'm going to go from G down to C, and look, 1, 2, 3, 4. We got the right number of notes. If I go up, I have to stick an extra thing in there, but if I go down, well, let me do it again and play the melody and kind of the chords at the same time, too. This is how you can be the whole band. Yeah. I never know what to do there because, I should play the root, the third, and that's what I should do. I've been trying to, put the 9 in and stuff, but let me just stick to basics here. I'm learning with you. Yeah, it sounded pretty good. It's D minor 7th without the root, because I got the root there, and then. This is easy. I'm just going to walk down from G to C, and I'm going to play the cool melody. All right. Going to the bridge. I shouldn't have done that. I know where to go. If you notice that I edit these videos sometimes, it's because I went someplace and did something that was like, I threw in some nines or some altered tensions, or I did a tritone substitution. And I don't want to confuse you. I'm trying to keep it simple. And not simple and not good, simple and good. Okay, and that thing on the end, we call that a turnaround, because you can sometimes use those to get back to the beginning of a song, especially when you're playing the blues. So if I was using it as a turnaround, I would have gone like that. Because when I get to the 5 chord, that's what takes you back to a 1 chord, which is how this song starts. Not every song starts with the 1 chord, but this one does. And that was a G chord, and that was a kind of a fancy one. So that's G7 with that note. And then the 7 was moved down here. And I don't think I played that one. And I did that. All right, and I'll just briefly show you now a couple of the more advanced things that jazz players do with this basic knowledge. And you'll see it's not really that, if you know the basics, this is not really that difficult. So a lot of times, the left hand will play what's called rootless voicings. All right, so we take like C major 6 here, our starting chord, and we're going to get rid of the root. That's why they call it rootless. And we're going to put this note in. It's like the 9th. That's like the 9th note of the scale there. And we'll play the melody. And here I'm going to another rootless voicing, and this is the D7 chord. There's the root. You remember this was the 3rd, this was the 7th. We had left out the 5th, and I'm adding 2 more notes here that don't really sound like they quite fit with the chord, but if I played a big chord and used those notes, it's like that chord, just down to these 4 notes. And you'll hear, if you know this song, even without the root there, you'll hear the song the right way. Now I'm going to go to D minor 7th. And there's the root, and there's most of the chord and a little bit more. And then I'm going to go to a G7 like this, and back there. And that G7, now the dominant chords can be the ones you can really have the most fun with, because there's lots of little combinations that you can do here. We got G7th here. I got these 2 kind of, notes that are, what they call tensions or color tones. They call them pretty notes sometimes. I don't like that. I don't like calling that. You can flat the 9. You can flat the 13. You can flat one and not the other. Hey, let's talk a little bit about, the approach to improvising a melody. All right, we know the song. All right, so how do you improvise a melody in that little space there? You can keep the original melody in there and just dance around it. Ooh, I didn't like that note. So how do you improvise in a little space like that? Here's your melody. What do you do? Well, start with the melody and mess around with it, and you'll get some ideas. Dance around it like this. You have to find the melody that sounds right to you. But maybe it could be something like, or maybe it could be. You get an idea, then you think of the variations that would work, and you just have to mess around on the piano for a good portion of your life to find notes that you can kind of hear in your head. So, and then it dawns on you at some point maybe that you're just doing C major scale here. I don't know what that was, but, And, if you can't find a melody just using those notes here, you need to develop your musical sensibilities, learn how to sing a few nursery rhymes, study some piano, study some piano. What was I talking about? Trying to make a melody, all right? And even random things just work. So let's just say I'm going to play 7 notes and jump around a lot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's mess around with rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right? And that was an idea that came from nowhere, and it ended up being nothing. I mean, who can relate to that? I'm just messing around. But, put in a little bit of a scale. I didn't really know what I was going to do there. I just was aiming for notes and having fun. Now, if I try to play something that's really in my mind, do 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 do. That's what takes practice. You have to want to do something. Bum ba da bum bum ba da. And then hunt for the notes until you find them. And once you can find the notes that you're looking for, and you do that often enough, you just learn how to play. You just learn how to let a melody come out. And I'm kind of right in the same area as the original melody too, so that always helps make it sound like you know what you're doing. And then we're going to go to this chord, D dominant 7th. Remember, it had a flat 5 here. And I know what to do. You play a whole tone scale, but I don't want to think of it. I don't want to approach it that way. I just want to approach it like what sounds good. So, who learns fastest? Kids, all right? So we should imitate the kids. This is how they do it. And they know that note's is right. You just look for some notes. Those are going to be my notes, all right? I could have gone and said, well, maybe I like that too, but why not? I went for that. Let's see what happens. You've got to hunt and peck around until you can kind of do it. And then you start to learn about scales and stuff like that. But if you can't just make up something that sounds good, all the scales in the world aren't going to help you. All right, now this is an easy part here because you've got D minor, G7, and C major 7 or C6, either one. This one's easier to get to. And every one of these chords, really, the white keys work. All right? That was like a melody that, a beginner is going to come up with. And I could take the same notes and make something that sounds, a little more advanced, and hopefully it'll make some sense too. And I took the same kind of notes, Now, I promised something advanced. Back before the altered scale was a thing, on the dominant chord, even if you're in C major, what you do is you play the C minor scale the way it is taught classically. They call this the harmonic minor scale. It's got this little Middle Eastern thing happening here. All right, okay? And you use that on the G chord to get back to C major, all right? But remember now, in the C minor scale, you have this note, all right? And you also have that one, and this kind of skip. So check this out, all right? The D minor, just stay on the white keys. That's a little hint here. It's usually a good idea not to end your melody right on the root if you want it to sound jazzy. You end it on like a ninth or a third or a fifth or something like that. Ninth is they call that pretty. You end it on the ninth, it sounds cool. Oh, that sucked. And as you work out your ideas, always remember, a friend of mine told me this the other day, the best thing to play on your solo is the melody. Nobody will ever complain if you play the melody. And if you listen to really some of the great players, they play the melody an awful lot. I'm not saying they do it all the time, but it's in there a lot of the time. And they dance around it. They put other little ideas in quickly, and but keep the melody in there. So I'll try to do a little bit of that here with some root position chords here to make it really easy. The only one I'm going to invert is going to be the G chord, and sometimes I'm going to do that or something like that. All right, so here we go. All right. Now, I hate to say this, but I'm purposely playing, I would say, under my potential here, because I'm not trying to play all kinds. I was just listening to Oscar Peterson do this on the seventh chord. He was doing this, and I think he went like something like that. All right, I mean, I would love to be able to play like that, and I can play some pretty complicated things from time to time, but you're not going to learn by watching a guy show off all the time. You have to learn by, watching something that you can understand. So I try to keep it simple for you. Okay. Who else keeps it simple? Christian from Berlin. What's his name? I'm going to link to him. It's in the description. Have a nice weekend, you all. If it's the weekend. If it's not, there's one coming up. Have a nice weekend, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks for tuning in to Tony Winston Jazz Piano College.